Hey guys, welcome back to World of Tanks. My name is Bruce and today I want to show you how you can play classic tank destroyers more offensively and hence more successfully in World of Tanks. Let's go! In World of Tanks, most tank destroyer players play their tanks super passively. They move to so-called TD positions and wait for adversary tanks to approach their position. Sometimes this can work, however, as your team is, let's say, about 50% of the times on the winning side, chances are that you won't do any damage with such a passive gameplay. So in order to make a decent amount of damage in every game, you need to play your TD more offensively. In fact, if you compare a classic TD against a medium tank, it has only one huge disadvantage, which is the lack of a fully rotatable turret. On the other hand, you get quite some advantages, for example firepower. On most maps there are positions where a lack of a rotatable turret is not a disadvantage. So let me show you some gameplay to give you an idea of how you can play tank destroyers more offensively and hence more successfully. Alright, here we are in the first battle. We are spawning on Studzianki and let's first of all take a look at the map and see what options we have. Spawning on Studzianki in the west, this is how the game usually develops. And those positions right here are the typical tank destroyer positions where most of the players go at the beginning of the game. Maybe even right here on the K1 position, or maybe on the northern side at the B1 position, or maybe at the B3 position. Now, in my opinion, those positions are defensive positions which only work once the adversary team advances. So why can't you go like to this position and play a bit more offensively, fight alongside with your medium tanks, and then see how the game is developing. And later on, if your team is pushing or winning the flank, then you can also relocate and then man those defensive tank destroyer positions. But at the beginning of the game, I would play more offensively and simply try to help out my team, conducting second line gameplay. This is important, second line gameplay, but where the fight actually takes place. Alright, so yes, I'm playing in a platoon and I do not want to sit at the rear of the map in a typical sniping bush and simply wait for the game to basically pass by, but instead I want to use my mobility that I have on my tank destroyer and also my firepower and add those values to the game right from the get-go. Now, the biggest lesson I want to teach you in this video is if you stand at the rear of the map with a tank destroyer because you think you are a TD and you want to basically stay at the rear of the map, then what you do is you take your tank out of the game for the first minutes of the game and you give your adversaries a distinct advantage, because then if the tank destroyer player on the adversary team does not conduct this sort of gameplay, then the adversary team does have an advantage. Now, don't get me wrong, I pushed aggressively in this position because I was playing in a platoon and we decided to rush this position all three together. But the point I want to make is there's nothing more useless than a tank destroyer standing at the rear of the map in a typical TD position, not doing any damage whatsoever. Take a look at what the Jagdpanzer IV is doing. Take a look at what the Tier 6 Japanese G-Ro is doing, and also the VK3002M. Those tanks do not do any damage whatsoever because there's no adversary tank in the vicinity they can shoot at. Excuse me. So instead, I'm playing much more offensively. And yes, I do not have a fully rotatable turret, but nonetheless, I can participate in the game and I can simply try to use a bush, try to make damage and then fall back rearwards and yeah, simply hide. That is no problem whatsoever. That's what I would do in a medium tank anyway, so excuse me. So far, there's simply no difference. Okay, okay, that was super unfortunate. I didn't hit the KV2, maybe next time. And I think this IKV-65-2 is a typical example. It's a good example because it is one of those classic tank destroyers. I know there are different types of TDs, for example, tanks with no armor and at least partially rotatable turrets like the Charioteer or the Gorilla, and you can play those tanks more as a TD medium hybrid. Then you have heavily armored tank destroyers like the Italian ones, for example, and they even also have a partially rotatable turret. So this means that you can play those TDs more as a TD heavy hybrid. But in this video I want to talk about the classic tank destroyers, so tank destroyers which lack armor, which are not heavily armored, which do not have a rotatable turret, and which are most of the time by the player base played as, let's say, regular TDs, i.e. most players go into a typical TD bush and simply wait and yeah, see what is going on. Now the problem is, in my opinion, like on average you win 50% of the games and you lose 50% of the games on average. And if you win a game, if your team is on the winning side, then the fight is taking place at the side of the enemy, so where the enemy spawns. So if you sit at the rear of the map in a typical TD position, then all the whole game is passing by and you miss chances of making damage, like the WoT is doing in this game. Now on the other hand, if your team is on the losing side, then yes, the game is moving towards your position, so you will be able to make damage. However, the problem in this situation is that you will most likely be outnumbered and thus only get a chance of making maybe 1 or 2 shots. And so if you commit or if you conduct this kind of playstyle, then you will be less successful overall in your tank destroyer. Now, the good thing about a tank destroyer, even though it doesn't have a fully rotatable turret, is it has quite a competitive firepower. And like in this case, in the case of the IKV-65-2, it also has a decent mobility. And you can use that. You do not have to stand still in a bush and simply conduct the red line sniping, but you can use this mobility, and that is exactly what I'm doing here. Now, we've won the southern flank, and now the game is taking place in the north, or at least on the sea lane where the heavy tanks are usually fighting. So I want to flank over to the other side and then go into this bush, activate my binoculars, and then take shots onto those tanks and catch them by surprise. And I can do this because I am using the mobility of this tank to its advantage. So I think my bottom line is, do not stand still in a bush if you're playing a tank destroyer. Try to participate and try to make the difference for your team. Try to outplay your adversary tank destroyer, and while he is standing still in a bush not participating in the game, you can be the one tank which is giving your team an advantage on the respective flank. So let's see, let's fully aim in, and lovely 240 alpha damage, nice. Of course I reverse because I expect to be spotted after every shot. That's what you should do as well. And here you go, we can take him out, and I think he is behind cover, so I can simply, okay, he's, here you go, and nice, another damage, so 1522 damage. I call this a decent game on tier 6, and here you go. We even made a blind shot here, so about 1700 damage on our clock. And so yeah, I think this was a perfect example on how you can play more offensively. I'm not saying aggressively per se. You should not conduct first line gameplay. You should always have like teammates in front of you. But all I want to say is, don't sit at the rear of the map like the WoT was doing in this whole map, but play more offensively and use the strength of your tank to your advantage. Second game, this time we're spawning on Ghost Town, once again in our IKV-65-2, and this time we're spawning in a tier 7 game, so we are low tier. But first of all, let's take a look at the map and see what options we have. Spawning on Ghost Town in the south, this is how the game usually develops. And right here you can see the, let's say, the typical tank destroyer positions where most of the TD players go. In my opinion, this is a waste at the beginning of the game, because this is not where the fight takes place. Now, Wargaming has adjusted the map so that you cannot even support your heavy tanks and shoot into this position from this position right here. So even this position, which was kind of which kind of made sense, has now become useless. So where the fight takes place is right here, and maybe right here. However, once the light tank is killed, then the fight is more or less taking place right here, plus here in the middle. So in my opinion, it makes completely sense, even with the turretless tank destroyers, to advance right here and to get maybe crossfire into this position. That is exactly what I would do in a medium tank, and then maybe also man this bush here and try to outspot those tanks here, and even use your gun depression to get one or another shot. That is the exact same thing that I would do in a medium tank, and in my opinion there's no problem with it, because once you see those tanks advancing, you can then fall back and man those defensive positions. But you will not basically leave all this damage to your teammates, but you will participate basically in the game. So that is exactly what we are going to do. Now, I chose this replay in order to show you that this playstyle is also working in a low tier scenario, because we are now going to a position excuse me, from which we can use our gun depression, use our firepower, and where we still have enough cover in order to fall back and to retreat if it is necessary. Notice how there's only the SP1C advancing with me. Now the BK3002D and also the Nashorn are also joining the position, which is good. But I can go into this position. I have no problem with it whatsoever, because the SP1C is now spotting in the typical bush. And if I see enemy tanks advancing, I can then take the decision to fall back and to retreat into a more defensive position where the Yak Panther is currently situated. There you go. But compared to the Yak Panther, I now have 231 damage on my side, and that is simply because I'm participating in the game. And that is what I want to teach you in this battle. So fortunately, the AT8 is making a horrible gameplay, and so we can simply farm him. He's not even turning around, which is excellent. Can we get the kill shot? No, it doesn't look like, because our DPM is simply too bad. But anyway, compared to the Yak Panther, I have now 700 damage on my side. And that is simply because I am participating at the game and I am not going to a defensive position. Take a look at the rest of the team at the tank destroyer. So the Yak Panther is now finally moving, for sure, with 0 damage so far made. Look at where the Su-152 is positioned, and look at where the ARL is located. Those tanks for sure have not made a single amount of damage, simply because they are not participating in the game, simply because they are going to a position from which they cannot shoot onto the adversary tanks. Now, of course, you have to say that the Su-152 is a much less mobile tank, so he would have to take the decision to retreat much earlier than myself in the IKV-65-2, but that is a different story, and that can obviously be adjusted in the game. But once again, the bottom line I want to teach you is participate in the game. Use the advantage of a tank destroyer, which is the good firepower, and bring this to the game. Add this to the game. If you do this, you will give your team a distinct advantage, and you will also increase your win rate, because you will be the one making the difference in each game. This is of course a bit tricky, because you do not have a fully rotatable turret, but look at what I'm doing. I'm just standing here conducting second line gameplay, and I can support my team once the adversary team or the adversary tanks make mistakes. And so far 950 damage, which is already a decent game for a tier 6 tank. Now we have 1200 damage, excellent. And as you can see, yeah, there's so many opportunities for you to make damage if you play a bit more offensively. Here you go, nice, another 247 damage, excellent. And so, yeah, of course we're lucky because our team is winning the central portion of the map, the heavy lane basically in the city. But even if the adversary team would have won the middle, and if we were on the losing side, I would still have 1444 damage, and so I would have a decent result in my tier 6 tank. And that's what I want to tell you. You will be overall more successful, you will have a better win rate, and you will have better statistics, and you will overall make more damage if you play more offensively. Once again, I'm not saying that you can push the enemy fronts in your turretless tank destroyer. That's not what I'm suggesting. I'm suggesting that you should participate in the game and not simply go to a camping position like the ARL is doing on the J0 position. Look at how passively he is playing. I'm pretty sure that he has not made a single amount of damage in this game, and now as the complete right flank is won, that's the time where he advances. That's way too late to make any kind of damage, and thereafter, most likely after the game, this tank player is complaining about how bad his stats are. Well, of course, because he's not participating in the game and he simply has no chance of making any damage. Notice how I changed my playstyle now to a very aggressive playstyle, and that is because the game is won. There are only 5 enemy tanks so far in the game, only 3 of which are on my side, and I'm still full HP, and so of course I can now trade my HP. I do not have to sit in a heavy tank or in a medium tank in order to trade my HP at the end of the game. I can also do that in a turretless tank destroyer, and yeah, so I'm able to boost my damage up to a whopping 1900, which is a pretty decent result if you ask me in a tier 6 match. Let's use auto aim and bam. And so yeah, 2000 damage in a tier 6 tank destroyer. This Yak Panther is he's now mad at me, most likely because his game was much less successful than my game, but that is simply because I participated in the game and I played more offensively, even though I am playing in a turretless tank destroyer. And yeah, that is the difference of a, let's say, an above average tank destroyer player or an below average tank destroyer player. You cannot sit at the rear of the map and then expect that you will have good games, good results in every game. If you want to be more successful in the tank destroyer, you have to participate in the game and you have to be where the fight takes place, i.e. you have to play more offensively. And that also works if you are in a low tier situation. So let's jump into the third game. Alright, third and last game. This time we are spawning in a tier 5 match, so we are top tier. But let's first of all take a look at the map and see what options we have. Spawning on outpost in the north, this is how the game usually develops. And right here you can find the typical defensive tank destroyer positions that most of the player base use if they are playing in a TD. Now, in my opinion, once again, this is not where the fight takes place. The fight takes place right here, i.e. you cannot take shots from this defensive position. The fight, yes, here and there takes place here. However, after those tanks have fired a shot, they will retreat behind this little hill here. So it's pretty difficult to basically take a shot. Plus, they need to get spotted from a tank, which is, at least at the beginning of the game, most likely not the case. Now, instead, in my opinion, this is the most important position, and players tend to rush this position. So if you have enough mobility, there's no reason why you cannot go to this position, even in a turretless tank destroyer. Keep in mind, you are safe basically from those houses here, and there's only one corridor, so you do not need a rotatable turret whatsoever, and you can simply help your team to basically win this strategic position and get your first damage relatively early on in the game. So yeah, I promised you another low tier match, but I had problems with the replay, so let's take this game, and I think it's also very beneficial to learn something. So as you see me as you can see, I am not going, as I said, to a sniping position, but I'm advancing into a position where I can have a direct impact on the game at the beginning of the game. Of course, my firepower is the best one in this game, and so it would be completely senseless, or not senseless, but useless, to not bring the firepower to the game and not give my tank an advantage at the beginning of the game. Okay, look at what look at how Holiday Ops shenanigans is going on. The adversary team is not going to the central position, but instead pushing into this completely lost position. And of course, yeah, we can simply farm them and simply take them out with 240 alpha damage, which is of course pretty decent on tier, nice, on tier 6. So yeah, as I said, my firepower is the best one in the game if I spawn in a tank destroyer and if I am top tier. And so of course you want to bring this firepower advantage to the fight and help your team to win the game. So what you do not want to do is you do not want to sit at the rear of the map and simply waste time and not participate in the game. As you can see, of course, I need to play cautiously because I do not have any armor whatsoever. But of course, I can sit here, be pre-aimed, and as soon as the KV-1 advances, I can take a shot and then even collect some assisting damage. Okay, here you go. Oh, nice, wonderful cupola shot onto the OE. Of course, now I need to be cautious because if those tanks are pretty much aimed in, then I have a problem. Because once again, I do not have any armor whatsoever. But take a look at the game. There's like we're 2 minutes into the game and we already made 934 damage simply because we play more actively and more offensively as the typical tank destroyer in World of Tanks. Of course, once again, this is Holiday Ops shenanigans. So with only 2.5 minutes into the game is completely won. And yeah, that's just how it is. But if the OE advances, then we will be able to... Okay, he's now taken out, and you know what? It's now time to push forward aggressively and to simply make more damage. No matter if you're playing a tank destroyer or if you're playing a medium or a heavy tank, you have to anticipate what's coming next, and you always want to be where the fight takes place. That is, once again, and I repeat myself, I know, not only important in a heavy tank, but then also in a turretless tank destroyer, and you can do it because you have the mobility. You go, and you have the firepower. That was a hit that you need to make this happen. And after all, you also do have some HP. I know that you have an HP disadvantage compared to heavy tanks, but nonetheless, you do have enough HP to participate at the game. And so yeah, only 4 minutes into the game and we already made with our blind shot about 1400 damage, which is excellent once again in a tier 6 tank. And that is simply because we play a more active role in our tank destroyer, more offensive role. And so yeah, here you go, 1600 damage. Then we get the kill shot on the T67, nice, and maybe we can even get another shot on the T3485M. Absolutely. And so yeah, overall we made 2000 damage in this game, and there's the Yak Panzer still alive. Maybe we can get some more damage, but we made 2k damage in a tier 6 tank destroyer simply because we play more offensively. And yeah, I think those 3 replays really showed how much better you can perform if you do not conduct the typical red line camping / sniping, but play more offensively in your tank destroyer. Alright guys, that was it for today with a little tutorial on how to play classic tank destroyers more offensively and hence do more damage in every game. Do you play your TDs as offensively, or do you go to a sniping bush and hope that adversaries advance into your position? Feel free to leave a comment in the comment section down below. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. Consider subscribing to my channel, and I see you next time in another World of Tanks video.